Hello, I'm Carolin, and I'm currently a postdoctoral investigator at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. And so I'm part of the Marine Sensory Biology and Bioacoustics Lab run by Dr. Aran Mooney and his team. And so I joined the team to help investigate how all sorts of marine organisms respond to sound and sound pollution, and to find out a little bit more about also how they produce sounds. Yes, so the rig shark is a fairly small species of shark. So they get around a meter, just above a meter, and they're actually consumed in Australia and New Zealand for, fish and chips. It's quite the common, shark to hunt for, or the lemonfish they call them. And so it's a very docile kind of shark. So, not the type that would ever attack a human being or, could even harm a human being, because they have they have flat teeth that they wouldn't even be able to harm people when they bite. So it's a small species of shark that lives close to the ocean bottom, and it hunts for like crustacean, crabs, shrimps, small fish, and is itself hunted by larger sharks and also by dolphins, marine mammals, larger fish. So it's both, it's hunted and it's hunting for small organism close to the seafloor. Originally, that was part of my PhD project. I was interested in studying their hearing. So, what sounds can they hear, and how sensitive are they? And so I was doing a behavioral study where I was basically training the sharks to respond to sounds that I played them. And so I was feeding them at the same time. A lot of people know this type of behavioral experimentation also as the Pavlov's dogs experiment. So a similar approach I used. And so it was kind of, over several weeks and months, I was working with the same sharks in this, controlled experimental facility. And so during these kind of hearing tests, I also had to handle the sharks for short periods of time. For example, to ID them or to measure their length or to, push them from one location in the tank to the other. And those kind of handlings were all done underwater. So we were just basically gently holding the shark for a few seconds. And so that's when I kind of heard those clicking sounds, which then caught my attention. And so I also did, the same approach with other shark species. But those clicking sounds didn't happen for the other shark species. It was really just that one species that kept making these sounds. So what we had was our recordings, our observations, but then also the scans that our collaborator in Belgium was happy for us to do. And so he was an expert, or is an expert, in fish sound production. And he basically said, I couldn't find any particular structure like in other fish that would indicate that how they make those sounds. They didn't have any specific structures like a swim bladder. Sharks do not have a swim bladder, for example, or any particular muscles that we know of. But he said, we could propose we could make a first hypothesis saying, referring to the teeth, because the teeth are quite flat. And so he said the sounds could be quite similar to teeth snapping sounds that we know from like rays and other fish. And so that's how we made our first best guess or hypothesis, saying it could be the teeth based on their morphology and based on the sounds. However, we say also in the paper, I say that this hypothesis has not been verified. So we're putting it forward, but we would need to verify it in the future. That was the reason why we published it in the end, because, unfortunately at the time it was an accidental discovery in captivity. And so the notion was, probably it doesn't mean very much because it's in captivity. But then, we thought maybe it's good to put this out there, because as you say, I personally would not be surprised, because there have been anecdotal reports of sound production in sharks. And now in the past 2 years, actually, 2 papers came out of rays showing to make clicking sounds in the wild, very similar clicking sounds actually to the shark. For me, I think the sharks were more like a coincidence. I think the passion before was the ocean. And that is something that I can't really explain. It's something inside myself that was just fascinating and drawn. But also it started with biology. So I wanted to be a biologist, and then the ocean just became more and more of interest. And so I followed that by, going a little bit extracurricular trajectory. So I applied for special fellowships and, applied more than once. So, when I didn't get it, I applied another time and another time. And so I wiggled my way in to the marine biology. And so at the time, I was also a major in neuroscience. And so I learned a whole bunch of sounds and signals and hearing and the perception of sound. And then I thought, I came across that field called bioacoustics. And so I thought, I could combine a little bit of the knowledge around sound perception and sounds in general, and then with the ocean and marine organisms. And so that's how I got into that specific field.